Saudi Arabia is one of the luckiest countries on earth because of its immense oil reserves. As I showed in my last video, the discovery of this black gold completely changed the kingdom's fate. But oil is not forever. A moment will come when the reserves either dry out or, more likely, the world will shift away to other energy sources. The Saudi leaders know that the clock is ticking. In fact, they've known it for decades. This urgency has prompted them to implement various reform plans, some timid, some bold, with varied levels of success. From the 1970s push to process oil byproducts to today's multi-trillion-dollar plans for tourism and cities like Neom, the ambition has grown exponentially. Despite this long effort, Saudi Arabia has not yet achieved its decades-long goal of freeing its finances from the grip of oil. Let's take a look at the history of this epic quest, what they achieved in the early days, where the system reached its limits, and how the current Vision 2030 is attempting the most radical economic and social transformation in the kingdom's history. The first serious efforts to prepare the kingdom for a future beyond endless crude oil started in 1970 with the launch of the first 5-year plan. We can call this the Great Build-Up phase. The primary goal of the first 3 plans was to construct the physical backbone necessary for a modern economy. This involved massive investments directed towards building essential infrastructure: roads, ports, airports, power generation, and water desalination. The most effective diversification measure of this era was vertical integration. Instead of selling only crude oil, the government decided to use some of the oil and natural gas, which was often wastefully flared, as cheap feedstock to create value-added petrochemical and metal products. In 1976, the Saudi Basic Industries Corporation was established. Its role was to rapidly build a world-class manufacturing sector using the kingdom's hydrocarbon resources. SABIC played a crucial role in operating large-scale industrial complexes to produce a vast array of products. Today, it remains one of the world's largest chemical companies and a huge non-oil revenue generator. SABIC's products are the foundation of countless everyday goods. They include polymers and plastics, the building blocks for everything from car parts and electronics to pipes, packaging, and plastic bottles. Basic chemicals like ethylene and styrene, which are intermediate ingredients used across many industries. Large-scale production of urea and other fertilizers using natural gas as a hydrogen source, making SABIC a major global food chain supplier. The company is deeply rooted in the heavy industry sector, providing materials for construction and infrastructure. The ultimate goal of this vertical integration was to capture more value from the same barrel of oil, transforming a commodity export into a sophisticated industrial product that sells to global manufacturers. To support this manufacturing drive, the government developed specialized industrial cities. Yanbu on the Red Sea and Jubail on the Arabian Gulf were transformed into massive industrial hubs specifically dedicated to petrochemical and heavy manufacturing. Not every attempt at building new industries was successful. The best example is the government's program to become self-sufficient in wheat production. The government poured massive subsidies into growing wheat and establishing dairy farming, attempting to prove the kingdom could feed itself despite its arid climate. For a time, the plan seemed to work in achieving national self-sufficiency in wheat, Saudi Arabia even becoming a net exporter for a short while. However, the success was illusory. The cost of producing the wheat was 3 times higher than simply buying it from other countries. But this wasn't even the biggest issue. In such a hot and arid environment, a lot of water was needed to grow the crop. The vast majority of it came from deep, non-renewable aquifers called fossil water. The water accumulated underground over thousands of years, in periods when the climate was much wetter than today. This plan was doomed from the beginning. In just a few years, the underground water reservoirs started to deplete. Coupled with the exorbitant price subsidies that put a strain on the budget, the government scaled back from the program entirely in the 2000s, returning to food imports from the global market. The wheat project is a powerful lesson. Not all forms of diversification are economically or environmentally viable. It's also a reminder: Saudi Arabia got rich because of its immense luck, not because of the competency of its leaders. The first 2 decades of the diversification push were vital for creating an industrial base, but by the 1990s, it became clear that the goal of fiscal independence from oil was far from achieved. The underlying problem was the very nature of the Saudi state, often called a Rentier State, because the government derived most of its massive income from external rent, oil sales rather than from taxing its citizens. As the kingdom grew rich, the state became the primary employer. Most Saudi nationals were given jobs, often fictive, redundant, or overstaffed, as a primary way to distribute the oil wealth and maintain public loyalty. This system created a social barrier. Massive waves of migrants were brought in to perform nearly all the physical, technical, and service sector jobs. Over time, the Saudis grew accustomed to the comfort and started viewing private sector, manual, or service sector work as unfit for them. This mentality made any move toward a labor-intensive, diversified economy extremely challenging. The system was also inherently inefficient. The state dominated the economy, and the private sector was not a self-sustaining engine of growth. It was merely an appendage dependent on government spending and contracts. Without reforms, the economy could only grow when oil revenue was high enough to pour into state-led projects. To make matters more complicated, the population of the kingdom exploded in the late 20th century. It became clear that oil revenues would not constantly grow to keep up with the population rise. Unless immediate measures were taken, the per capita standard of living would erode, and cohorts of young people would enter adulthood to find no meaningful work. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, cyclical oil price crashes were a constant reminder of the vulnerability of the kingdom's finances. These crashes were like earthquakes that forced deep cuts to public spending. In 2015, King Abdullah died and his brother King Salman replaced him. Unlike other royal houses where the son succeeds the father, the succession process in Saudi Arabia has been different. Instead of the throne passing directly from father to son, it transitioned among the founder's sons. This meant that the next 6 monarchs were all brothers, each a son of Abdulaziz Al Saud. But now, 7 decades after the founder's death, all his remaining sons are too old to replace King Salman, so a new generation of leaders must emerge. King Salman has a son named Mohammed, and from the moment he became king, one of his urgent goals was to make Mohammed his crown prince and thus his successor. This was achieved in 2017 when, under pressure and threats, Muhammad bin Nayef relinquished his position as crown prince in favor of Mohammed bin Salman. All of this is important because Mohammed bin Salman is the de facto ruler of the country since his father is too old and frail to play an active role in managing state affairs. MBS is the mastermind behind the most ambitious reform program called Saudi Vision 2030. The program was unveiled in 2016 after the particularly harsh oil price crash of 2014-2016. Oil prices plummeted from $100 a barrel to under $30, leaving the kingdom's budget in a $98 billion hole. The main goal of Vision 2030 is to break free from oil dependence. Right now, oil makes up around 40% of Saudi Arabia's economy and over 70% of its exports. If the plan succeeds, the country will not be affected by future oil price crashes. Saudi Arabia wants to make money from tourism, entertainment, and renewable energy. Instead of oil rigs, luxury resorts along the Red Sea will attract billions of dollars. Around 50 resorts on the Red Sea are planned to open by 2030. Near Riyadh, a massive entertainment city called Qiddiya is being built. Equipped with theme parks and sports arenas, the city is expected to draw 10 million visitors annually by 2030. Tourism is targeted to hit 10% of GDP, up from 4.5% today. The state is also massively investing in green energy, 100 gigawatts of solar and wind power by 2030, enough to power millions of homes and free up oil for export. Right now, the government employs most Saudis and oil pays their salaries. Vision 2030 aims to change that and make the private sector the economy's engine. They are selling off parts of state-owned companies like Saudi Aramco, which raised $29 billion in 2019. That cash is being invested in new businesses like electric car factories. They also lifted up restrictions on foreign companies. Now you can own 100% of a business in Saudi Arabia with no local partner needed. The goal is for the private sector to account for 65% of the economy. If this plan works, millions of jobs for Saudis, especially young ones, will be created. Over half of the population is under 30, and youth unemployment has sometimes reached highs of 30%. Vision 2030 aims to get that down to 7%. For this goal, 1 million Saudis will be trained for jobs in tech, tourism, and manufacturing. They're also changing the attitude toward women. Female employment has jumped from 20% in 2016 to around 35% today thanks to reforms like allowing women to drive. The program so far has received mixed reviews. In some areas there were achievements while others seem set to fail. This brings us again to MBS, the Crown Prince. It would be fair to say that MBS is a very ambitious and energetic person. Vision 2030 is bold, reflecting the personality of its author. But at the same time, there is a bad side of MBS that darkens his decision-making process, and this is seen in Vision 2030 as well. Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi journalist who wrote, among others, in the Washington Post. He was critical of the regime and the Crown Prince. In 2018, Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. He never walked out alive. Inside, men sent from Saudi Arabia killed him. The news spread quickly and everyone started pointing fingers at the Crown Prince. MBS never acknowledged ordering the killing of the rebellious journalist, but everyone knows it was him. MBS also masterminded the invasion of Yemen in response to the Houthi takeover of most of northern Yemen. The Houthis are Shia Muslims and are hostile toward the Sunni Saudi royal family, but the invasion proved a big mistake. While Saudi Arabia has some of the best weapons in the world, it clearly does not have the best prepared soldiers. The Houthis, fighters hardened by battle and hardship, were not defeated by the Saudis. All of this tells us a more complete story about MBS. While indeed ambitious, he is impulsive and has a tendency for brutal measures, which makes him a poor decision maker. MBS did not get his position because of merit, but because of birth. Vision 2030 has elements that betray an inexperienced author who seeks extravagant projects that are not realistic. The best example is The Line, a city under construction in the northwest of the country shaped as a line 170 kilometers long. This is not the first attempt to build a line-shaped city. There are no current cities with this form today simply because it's a bad idea. Imagine having to travel from one side to the other. The city was also estimated at 500 billion to build, a gross underestimate. In reality, it would cost trillions to build, money that not even the Saudi kingdom has. The planning of this city also disregarded the people who lived in that region. Local tribes were forcibly displaced from their ancestral lands to make way for the construction. The region is also an important bird migratory route, and building a 500-meter-tall, 170-kilometer-long glass structure seems like a perfect trap for these birds. The good side of the story is that the line will probably never be completed, since the costs were miscalculated. Most experts believe the final cost could easily climb into the multi-trillion-dollar range, money that the kingdom does not have. All of this leads us to the conclusion that the latest reform plan, like many beforehand, is most likely going to have mixed results. There will be some achievements, but not to the point that the kingdom will free itself of oil dependence. Thank you for watching. What do you think? Is Vision 2030 a genius plan or a desert mirage? Please give it a like and subscribe if you found my video interesting. I'll see you in the next video.